What's up, guys? My name is Stephen Guadagni with 5 Tool Sports Science right here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We got a video coming to you about how trunk rotation unlocks pitching performance, and we're going to be looking at a study from ASMI and Dr. Fleisig on trunk axial rotation in baseball pitching and batting. They looked at 40 professional pitchers and 40 professional batters. So it's rare that you get studies with so many professional guys, so that's why I think it's a really high quality study. And then Dr. Fleisig is kind of like a legend in pitching biomechanics as well at ASMI. So let's get into it. Okay, so why trunk rotation matters in pitching. The trunk is the power bridge between your legs and your arm, maximizing your rotation and timing it with precision, and will help your velocity ceiling rise without solely relying on your arm. Okay, so this study confirms that trunk axial rotation, which we'll talk about, it's basically hip to shoulder separation. And acceleration are fundamental to pitching performance and should be trained as such. We will learn how much rotation, how fast, and when it happens for peak performance. Okay, so here's some of the key insights from the study. This is a picture from the study looking at what he calls trunk axial rotation, where it's happening at front foot strike. So pitchers reach 55 degrees plus or minus 6 degrees of trunk axial rotation relative to the pelvis. It occurred just before ball release, right as the front foot planted, and then trunk angular acceleration peaked at 11,600 degrees per second, plus or minus 3,100 degrees per second, which confused me for a second because I was thinking trunk angular velocity, which it would be like freakishly high for trunk angular velocity, but it's trunk angular acceleration, which is different from trunk angular velocity, which is basically just the initiation from once front foot strike hits, the initiation of movement is the trunk angular acceleration. So a little bit different than trunk angular velocity, but that explains why it's so high at front foot strike. So this is the moment basically when you're in your pitching delivery. I'm going to kind of do it from this forward position here. So I'm going to do it kind of like with a feet forward position, because there's a drill that we'll do in throwing where you're just going to step, you're going to land at front foot strike, you're trying to land as close as possible, and then you're going to go into your throw. And that to me is really what you're working on. Trunk axial rotation is how he's talking about it. We just call it, hip to shoulder separation in pitching, right? But it's basically the timing of when your front foot is hitting the ground and then where your shoulder position is relative to where your hips are. So this was like a feet forward, landing in your stride length, trying to keep your shoulders closed as possible. And so the trunk axial rotation, that's what they're looking at. At front foot strike, how much trunk twist and degrees closed are you at front foot strike? And these professional pitchers are landing anywhere from 55 plus or minus 6 degrees, all right? So that could be up to 60 degrees of trunk twist at front foot strike. So a pretty significant amount, okay? And then they're accelerating it extremely quick at front foot strike as well, okay? So it's the moment the hips stop, and then the trunk is going to erode and explode forward, transferring that stored energy into the arm, all right? So higher angular acceleration is going to equal higher velocity potential. So trunk angular acceleration is a strong proxy for rotational power, all right? So, I mean, that just makes sense. Like the quicker that you're able to, from the moment that you've hit front foot strike, and it just becomes this reactive movement, the quicker you're able to explode out of that, the quicker you're going to be able to rotate your trunk, okay? The faster the trunk whips into rotation, the more energy is going to be transferred up the chain. Again, just kind of common sense. The quicker that this is going to be able to rotate, the more, as long as the arm is in a good position to receive the energy, the more energy you're going to be able to transfer onto the arm, all right? This kinetic surge is essential for generating elite level velocity with less strain on the arm. So think of the trunk like a coiled spring, preloaded during stride, and then once you hit front foot strike, it all unloads. It becomes very reactive. By the moment that you hit front foot strike, the moment you go and your front leg hits the ground and you're landing in your separated position, it's 0.1 seconds and that ball is out of your hand. So it's a very reactive position. This is some of the most coachable and probably the most coachable time of the pitching delivery to get ourselves to land in that separated position at the moment of front foot strike, with the pelvis trying to initiate forward, the arm loading back, and it's coiled at front foot strike, and then just reacting once your front foot hits the ground, all right? So this is extremely important timing in the delivery. So it starts with separation, right? This is basically what we're talking about. During the stride phase, the pelvis begins to rotate, all right? So your hips start to rotate forward while the upper trunk stays closed. This delay is called hip to shoulder separation, creates tension in the obliques and in the trunk. proper sequencing allows the trunk to snap into acceleration at the exact moment energy is ready to flow, all right? Golf, they talk about the same thing. In fact, in this study, they were talking about in the golf swing how they're getting like 60 degrees of trunk separation, and they call it the X factor in golf, all right? So it's not just related to just baseball. You know, you have a little bit of it in hitting, you have it in golf, you have it in tennis, you have it in baseball pitching. It's just the ability to get your hips to be going in one direction, and then you're trying to land that front foot strike, and we're still loaded and coiled as much as possible, okay? And then this stretch shortening cycle, in the study, they call it the Serape effect, which we'll talk more about in a second, but the Serape effect, to me, it's kind of the same thing. It's talking about like fascia lines, diagonal lines. It's kind of just like a buzzword of talking about like the diagonal line, the stretch from your front foot all the way up into your arm. That's kind of the Serape effect to me. All right, so control of trunk extension and flexion is just as important as our rotation. So pitchers don't just rotate, they also extend and flex at the trunk during the delivery, all right? So controlled lumbar lordosis, or arching, during cocking and trunk flexion, and then trunk flexion during acceleration fine-tunes energy flow. So let me explain that a little bit. I'll go back to our lateral view. All right, so as you're transferring the energy through the hips and landing at front foot strike, and you're landing in your closed position, as you start to go through shoulder rotation and the arm goes into layback, your back starts to arch. You almost create like a C. You see these guys create this big extension, right? And then as they start to go forward and the front leg starts to get involved as they go into it, they start to go into flexion of the spine and into ball release. All right, so if you look at high-speed video of pitchers, they get what's called forward trunk tilt, and that's the body going from these deep extension positions and then into flexion of the spine. All right, so these motions are tightly coordinated with shoulder rotation and ball release. So it's not just the rotation, it's the flexion extension. All right, so number 5, why trunk chaining should be muy importante. The core musculature, especially the obliques, must be strong and fast. All right, training for rotational velocity, not just strength, enhances angular acceleration. And then without trunk control, force leaks, timing breaks down, and performance suffers. So this is something that you have to be training in the weight room. It's something that you're going to have to be training in your mechanical training, whether you're doing like med balls or whether you're doing plyo baseballs. We're training aspects of trying to get more hip to shoulder separation. You could even be doing, functional training where you're doing heavier weight and then going to more explosive weight. But essentially, you got to be training the trunk and you got to be training rotational power. All right, training takeaways for pitchers. Prioritize rotational core strength and speed, med ball throws, cable exercises, resisted separation drills, etc. Build mobility and control in trunk flexion, extension, and rotation. Develop timing and sequencing through video or motion capture feedback. Train both sides of the trunk to reduce asymmetries and risk of injury, all right? So do heavy load training, do explosive stuff with med balls, do explosive stuff with water bags, use motion capture to look at, how well you can rotate. You gotta be training the mobility, you gotta be training the strength, you gotta be training the speed and the explosion, and then you gotta be training the timing, the coordination, and the sequencing in the delivery as well, all right? So those are the big key takeaways. And that's it. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it helps.